Pablo Escobar was seen as a hero for the poor and an enemy of the rich. He was and still is an idol to many men around the globe. However, what is often forgotten was his ruthless and murderous nature that terrorized Colombia and many other countries for decades. Everyone who crossed his path was met with bullets. Politicians, policemen, generals, and even former girlfriends. Speaking of people who crossed Escobar's path, on your screen you see the late Rodrigo Lara, a former Colombian politician and Minister of Justice of Colombia. Lara was famous for his harsh stance against powerful drug cartels, which earned him a lot of respect from the people of Colombia. This was at a time when the people who spoke out against drugs were getting killed from left and right. During the same time in 1982, Pablo Escobar was elected to Congress, a childhood dream of his. Angered by this, Lara took it upon himself to expose Escobar's crimes to the public. He tied him to the Medellin cartel, which officially hadn't been done before. The problem with Lara was that he couldn't be bribed like every other official, and this would soon force Escobar to initiate a more brutal fix to the problem than normally. Because of Lara's efforts, Escobar was expelled from the Congress. The minister also went further, reviving criminal charges against Escobar and other drug lords, such as Carlos Leder. Lara also ordered the seizure of 250 of Escobar's planes. In April of 1984, Escobar contacted one of his most loyal sicarios, John Jairo Arias Tascon, known as the boss of all hitmen. He was tasked with eliminating Rodrigo Lara. Tascon began orchestrating the murder and gave the job to two of his most trusted associates, Byron Velasquez and Ivan Dario Guisado. On the 30th of April 1984, they initiated their plan. At the time of his assassination, Lara was in his 1976 Mercedes-Benz W123 when two hooded hitmen drove past his heavily armed SUV convoy on a Yamaha motorcycle and quickly rained Lara with bullets from their Mac-10. During the attack, his bodyguards killed one of the hitmen, Ivan Dario Guisado. However, Byron Velasquez managed to escape. The murder was a clear message from Pablo Escobar to the Colombian government that he was in charge and that they should never dare to cross him again. Escobar wasn't only assassinating political opponents, he was also famous for murdering some of his mistresses. One of them was Wendy Chavarriaga Gil, a former lover of Pablo Escobar, and later on in her life also a lover of Escobar's favorite sicario Popeye. At his height, Escobar was bringing in almost $50 million in sales every single day from his drug operation. He had basically conquered the world and destroyed his competition. You could say with absolute certainty that he was the top dog in the drug industry. No one came close to him. And like many other conquerors before him, he also had to have his share of women.
Él siempre tenía una así de planta y resulta que el patrón le tenía prohibido a sus amantes que se dejaran embarazar.
Escobar was known to sleep with some of the most beautiful models in all of Colombia. He would give them expensive gifts and other materialistic stuff in return for their beauty and loyalty. However, when Pablo's empire started crumbling down in the early 90s, many of his past mistresses started informing on him. This would prove to be a fatal mistake for many of them, especially in the case of Wendy Chavarriaga Gil. According to Popeye, she got pregnant for financial gain and was subsequently dumped by Pablo. Enraged by this, she made Popeye fall in love with her after they met at a bar in order to get information on Escobar's whereabouts through the notorious hitman.
Y estaba ahí y la vi a ella. Cuando hice contacto visual con ella, empezó a sonreírse conmigo. Y esa noche amanecí en el apartamento de ella.
When Pablo found out that they were dating, he advised Popeye to be cautious.
Ya fui y le dije, patrón, me encontré con Wendy anoche. Mío se acostó con ella, le dije, sí señor. ¿Cierto que hace el amor muy rico? Sí señor mío, ojo.
According to him, she only wanted to be with the real bosses.
No es un hombre para ella, porque ella estaba enseñando a narcotraficantes y nosotros éramos sicarios.
And he was right. After tapping her phone, he discovered a recording of Wendy speaking with members of the Search Block, a Colombian police special operations unit tasked with killing Escobar. She said, "Popeye hasn't given me any information about Pablo's whereabouts. I'll tell you when I find out." Popeye recalled Pablo informing him of what he had discovered and telling him to assassinate her.
Entonces un día el patrón me llama a mí y me coloca una grabación. Era la señorita Wendy hablando con un capitán de la policía.
He arranged for her to meet him in a cafe, and he ordered 2 of his men to complete the task.
En un restaurante que queda en un centro comercial cerca acá en Medellín que llama Oviedo, y el restaurante llamaba Palos de Moguer.
Despite the fact that Popeye was a master assassin who had murdered hundreds of men, he was unable to kill Wendy because he loved Wendy. When the waiter called out for Miss Wendy, his men were immediately ordered to take action.
Entonces cuando yo la llame el teléfono, que la llame el mesero, se acostumbraba mucho. Usted la mata, porque yo no fui capaz de matarla yo mismo.
According to Popeye's account, he heard the gunshots and Wendy's screams. Popeye was heartbroken, but he still said this about Wendy. Wendy had betrayed my God, Pablo Escobar Gaviria. He was loyal to one man above everyone. Escobar didn't care who you were. If you crossed him, you would pay the ultimate price, which was what happened to this presidential candidate. Luis Carlos Galan was a Colombian politician who ran for the presidency of Colombia in 1990. Just like Lara did years before him, he declared himself a public enemy of the drug cartels and their vicious crimes and methods. In his presidency, he vowed to destroy them and remove their faces from Colombia. Now, what was the thing Pablo Escobar and all the other drug lords feared the most? If you guessed extradition to the United States, then you guessed correctly. As Escobar once said, better a grave in Colombia than a cell in the United States. During the late 80s, Galan started pushing for this exact thing. He had been in contact with the US and supported an extradition treaty of drug lords between them. This grew Galan's popularity immensely, since people were very tired of the massive drug-related violence in their country. Galan was given a choice like every other government official who stood in the way of Escobar. However, just like Lara, he wasn't interested in his money. He wanted to destroy him, and Escobar had to get him fast before it was too late. The 1990 presidential election was closing in, and time was of the essence for Pablo Escobar. Luis Galan was projected to win the election. However, before he could do so, he would meet the same fate as Rodrigo Lara. During 1989, a lot of different drug lords were after Galan, but failed to assassinate him on multiple occasions. He had a scheduled appearance in Bogotá. However, his staff advised him not to go, since they had received information that a group of hitmen were staying there with the sole purpose of eliminating him. Galan went anyway, and on the 18th of August 1989, while on a stage in front of 10,000 of his supporters, this happened.
Galan prepares to deliver a campaign speech in Sochoa, southwest of Bogotá.
Pablo Escobar targeted him and had him killed.
A corrupt policeman by the name of Miguel Maza Marquez had let some of Pablo's sicarios into the premises, and they unloaded their submachine guns onto the presidential candidate. He was killed immediately and can be seen falling down from the scene in the clip. The killer was identified as being Escobar's head sicario, Popeye, who years later admitted to firing the bullets, as high-profile officials who refused to cooperate with drug lords increased their level of security. Pablo Escobar had to resort to other methods of eliminating them. This was the case of the tragic story of Avianca Flight 203, a passenger plane with 107 people on board. After the death of Luis Galan, the nation was furious and terrified. The only person who had the balls to take the reins was Galan's protege, Cesar Gaviria Trujillo. He was also against the drug lords and fought to destroy their existence in Colombia. This was very problematic for Pablo Escobar, since Gaviria's security was really tight. This made an assassination attempt almost impossible. However, after talking to one of his most trusted hitmen, La Kika, they found a solution. After intercepting Gaviria's flight plan, they were able to see that he was to take Avianca Flight 203, bound for Cali on the 27th of November 1989. It is unknown who got the assassination idea, but La Kika was tasked with getting the job done. He recruited a young Colombian man who he manipulated into going on the plane with what he thought was a tape recorder. What he didn't know was that it was actually a lethal bomb meant to kill everyone on the plane, including himself. He had been told to wait till the plane was in the air before hitting what he thought was the record button. Instead, when he pressed it, the plane blew up, killing 107 people on board. And just as Pablo Escobar thought his attack was a success, he found out that César Gaviria Trujillo wasn't even on the plane.
El objetivo era César Gaviria Trujillo, era un candidato a la presidencia de la República. Él no aborda a último momento, pero ya la bomba estaba montada.
He had been warned by security and forced not to go on the plane. On board of the plane were 2 Americans, which caused outrage in the US. Everybody wanted Escobar's head, and this event marked the start of his downfall. While Gaviria was lucky that he survived, that wasn't the case of Carlos Mauro Hoyos. He was a politician and the General Inspector of Colombia. What made him particularly dangerous to Escobar's rule was his close relationship with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Hoyos was considered one of the toughest government officials in the war against drug trafficking. This also gave him a massive target on his back. Threatened and angered that he couldn't pay him off, Escobar started to look for ways to eliminate Hoyos. However, the drug lord had to be careful, since he already had a lot of heat in Colombia after killing numerous policemen, judges, and politicians.
Y lo he mirado a los ojos y no tiene miedo, tiene una sonrisa en sus labios, le fascinaba el peligro.
In January 1988, he ordered the kidnapping of Hoyos, and he was subsequently picked up on the 25th of January 1988 while driving towards the airport. During the chaos, Hoyos's 2 bodyguards, Jorge Enrique Loaiza and Gonzalo Villegas, would end up being shot to death, while the general inspector ended up being wounded and taken to a ranch near El Retiro. Escobar justified the kidnapping on the grounds that Hoyos had committed treason with his close relation to the DEA. He alleged that they had bribed him to approve the extradition of drug lords to the US. As a reaction to the kidnapping, the Colombian army deployed military sweeping operations in the area. According to Popeye, this put a lot of pressure on Escobar, and he tasked him with killing Hoyos immediately. He wanted to eliminate the chance of the army finding him and become victorious in the exchange. Instead, he ensured that the credit was given to the cartel when Popeye shot him 3 times and abandoned his body. Later that day, the cartel made this announcement. "We announce that we have executed Ati, General Carlos Mauro Hoyos, for the crime of treason against the fatherland. You can inform that the war will go on." Popeye also stated that he was ordered to kill a lot of other targets. This included the assassination of Antonio Roldan Betancourt, who was killed by him, and another Sicario Pinina. However, it was later discovered that Betancourt wasn't the main target of the assassination plot. Instead, it was Waldemar Franklin Quintero. He was the commander of the Colombian National Police, a fierce enemy of Escobar's who fought to destroy his empire. According to Popeye, he was also killed by Pablo a little after the first assassination attempt. His assassination took place on the same day as the murder of Luis Galan. Throughout the late 80s and early 90s, Pablo Escobar would escalate his narco-terrorism and kill thousands of Colombians. He eliminated his enemies with bullets, car bombs, and other lethal weapons. He would continue to terrorize Colombia until his death on a rooftop in Medellin, 1993.